Welcome to Hidden History and Biblical Mystery. I'm your host, Larry, and today we're ripping the mask off the greatest deception ever pulled on mankind. You think you know about Israel? You think you know about the Promised Land? Everything you've been taught is a carefully constructed lie designed to hide a truth so explosive it would shatter the foundations of modern religion and politics. Listen up, because what I'm about to lay out isn't just some theory. This is about how a handful of European banking families orchestrated the biggest land heist in history, and how they're still covering up the evidence that proves America was the true promised land all along. Let's start with something they can't hide. The first Jewish settlers didn't just randomly show up in Palestine in the late 1800s. This whole operation was bankrolled by the Rothschilds, the most powerful banking family in Europe. And check this out. Their name means red shield. Remember that, because it's going to become real important when we expose who was really pulling the strings in this whole scheme. Now, here's the thing about Palestine before these bankers got involved. It had been Muslim territory since the 7th century. But these banking families had a plan. First, they helped bleed the Ottoman Empire dry through wars and debt. Then, once the empire was on its knees, they swooped in with their settlers. But here's where it gets wild. Israel wasn't even a real place yet. It was just an idea cooked up by Theodore Herzl, who they love to call the spiritual father of the Jewish state. And this is where it gets even crazier. These same banking families originally wanted to set up their Jewish homeland in Uganda. Yeah, you heard that right. The infamous Uganda scheme of 1903. But the Russian Jewish delegates shut that down quick. Why? Because they already had their eyes on Palestine. And guess who was funding these Russian Jews? The Rothschilds again. The same family that would later orchestrate the entire World War I theater to make their land grab possible. Let me drop some real knowledge on you about this so-called Holy Land. When we look at what the Bible actually describes, a land of great rivers, vast forests, and abundant resources, a land flowing with milk and honey. Does that sound anything like the arid strip of land they're calling Israel today? Hell no. Every single biblical description matches the Americas perfectly. We've talked before about the ancient world's understanding of geography, how they recognized different regions and peoples across the globe. That knowledge wasn't lost. It was deliberately buried, because if people understood the true mapping of ancient lands, they'd realize that the Americas weren't just some new world Columbus stumbled upon. This was an ancient land with deep connections to biblical history. Think about it. We're finding Hebrew inscriptions carved in stone all across the Americas that predate Columbus by centuries. The Lost Lunas Decalogue Stone in New Mexico, with its ancient Hebrew inscription of the 10 Commandments, the Ohio Holy Stones. Mainstream archaeologists try to dismiss these because they blow holes in their whole narrative. But it gets even better. The religious practices of ancient American peoples match Hebrew customs exactly. We're talking about sacred fire, ceremonies, purification, rituals, even the blowing of a ram's horn, just like the Hebrew shofar. These aren't coincidences, folks. This is evidence of an ancient connection that's been deliberately hidden from us. And why has this been hidden? Because if people knew America was the true promised land, it would completely destroy the legitimacy of modern Israel. The whole justification for creating Israel was based on the claim that it was the biblical promised land. But what if that land was actually thousands of miles away in the Americas? This is why the banking families who funded Israel's creation worked so hard to suppress and destroy evidence of ancient Hebrew presence in the Americas. They couldn't have people figuring out that the real promised land was right here all along. The implications would shake the foundations of their whole power structure. The biggest smoking gun is the geography itself. The borders listed in Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers don't match up with modern Israel at all. But here's the kicker. They match perfectly with features in the Americas. The Bible talks about cedars that should be the tallest on earth, but the cedars in Lebanon aren't even close. Where do we find the world's tallest trees? Right here in the Americas. Now let's talk about how they pulled off this massive deception. In February 1915, as World War I was raging, the Rothschilds played both sides of the conflict like a fiddle. Germany had just introduced their new U-boats, and Britain was about to get their ass handed to them. The British were facing starvation and annihilation. That's when the Rothschild family, who owned the largest banks in both Germany and England, saw their chance. They orchestrated the sinking of the Lusitania, a move that would drag America into the war and save Britain's skin. But here's the real deal. This wasn't just about winning the war. This was about creating the perfect conditions for their land grab in Palestine. And sure enough, by 1917, we get the Balfour Declaration, a document that basically handed Palestine over to the Rothschilds on a silver platter. This same year, 1917, something else huge was happening: the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks take over, communism spreads, and suddenly the world is distracted by the Red Scare. But what they don't tell you is that the very same banking families behind Israel's creation were pulling the strings in Russia too. The media played their part perfectly. They had a stranglehold on information, controlling everything people knew about these events. The same families who run the media today were manipulating public opinion back then. And they're still doing it, hiding the truth about our real history and our true connection to this land. The archaeological evidence is overwhelming. We've got ancient cities, sacred sites, and artifacts scattered across the Americas that tell a very different story than what we've been taught. But they've been systematically destroying, hiding, or reinterpreting these finds to fit their narrative. What's really mind-blowing is how many ancient American ceremonies and traditions mirror exactly what's described in biblical texts. We're not talking about vague similarities. We're talking about precise matches in religious practices, astronomical knowledge, and spiritual traditions that couldn't possibly be coincidental. Think about all the supposed Native American mounds and structures across this land. They want you to believe these were built by primitive peoples, but the truth is, these were sophisticated constructions created by advanced civilizations that understood sacred geometry and astronomical alignments just like the ancient Hebrews. The deception goes even deeper when you look at how they've twisted the meaning of biblical prophecies to fit their narrative. They've got everyone looking at the Middle East for the fulfillment of ancient prophecies, when the real signs and wonders are happening right here in the Americas. But here's the thing, they can't keep this truth buried forever. More and more evidence is coming to light that proves America's true identity as the Promised Land. The archaeological finds keep piling up, the historical documents keep surfacing, and people are starting to wake up to the deception. The powers that be are desperate to keep this hidden because once people understand that America is the true Promised Land, their whole house of cards comes tumbling down. It's not just about real estate, it's about power, control, and keeping humanity disconnected from their true spiritual heritage. In part 2, we're going to dive even deeper into the evidence they don't want you to see. We'll expose the ancient maps that prove knowledge of the Americas went back thousands of years, the suppressed archaeological discoveries that challenge everything we've been taught, and the biblical prophecies that point directly to this land as the true Promised Land. Remember, folks, the truth is hidden in plain sight. They're counting on us, not connecting the dots, not questioning the official narrative. But once you see the pattern, once you understand the deception, you can't unsee it. Stay woke, stay vigilant, and keep seeking the truth. This is Larry from Hidden History and Biblical Mystery, and we're just getting started. If you found value in this teaching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more teachings of this caliber. Super HHBM2YT on screen text.